Welcome to the guide, Exile. In this guide, we're going to be looking at the basics of map and atlas interaction. For this guide, you do not need to have any pre-existing knowledge of the endgame system. But before we begin, I would just like to remind you that this guide was made in partnership with fellow content creator and atlas guru,
Karv.
You can find him on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, and Discord, which I have linked in the video description. As we are fresh out of the story, we will just have a few Tier 1 maps from monster drops, as well as the pre-crafted Tier 1 map provided by Zana on her first quest. She will instruct you to open and complete the Tier 1 map. Map completion entails killing the unique boss of the map. Completion will unlock the map on the atlas, filling it in and adding it to the pool of maps that can drop. So before we go any further, let us examine what the tier system means for maps, as well as explain how map drops work within the atlas to understand how we will move through it. The map tier number describes the base difficulty of the map and the level of the monsters within the map, as well as the base item levels that can drop. The map tier system begins at Tier 1, the easiest map tier, and currently goes up to Tier 16, the hardest map tier. A Tier 1 map contains level 68 monsters, while a Tier 16 map contains level 83 monsters. The easiest way to determine the map zone level is to add its tier number to 67, or once inside the map, look at the map overlay for the zone level. Integrated into the map tier system, there are also base colors, white, yellow, and red. These colors determine which affixes can be crafted onto them, and what strength these affixes can be. White tier maps will have the easier and weaker tier affixes, while red tier maps will have stronger and higher tier affixes, providing more returns. White maps include tiers 1 through 5, yellow maps include tiers 6 through 10, and red maps include tiers 11 through 16. With the tier system in place, let's move into exploring the first map tiers of the atlas. Now first we have to consider how and which maps are allowed to drop based on our atlas completion. Maps on the atlas will either be locked, gray and not filled in, or unlocked, colored and filled in. Maps are also connected via small dashed lines, and this is an important feature to remember. Rule 1. Maps that are locked will only drop from connected map bases, whether or not the base being ran is completed. Maps that are unlocked can drop from within any map, as long as they are within the tier drop restrictions, which we will discuss next. Note that all Tier 1 maps can always drop regardless if they are unlocked or not. Let us take a look at an example. Say that we have an atlas with all the Tier 1 maps completed. We then run and complete a Tier 2 Arid Lake map. In this map, we would be able to drop all Tier 1 maps, as well as the connected and locked Tier 3 Peninsula. We would not be able to drop any other Tier 2 or 3 map, however, since we have not completed and unlocked any other unconnected ones. After we complete Arid Lake, we will then be able to drop it from any map on the atlas that can drop Tier 2 maps, regardless of their connections to each other, since Arid Lake is now completed and unlocked. Rule number 2. Connected lock maps to the map base that is currently being run have twice as high chance to drop than unlocked maps, whether the unlocked maps are connected or not. This is useful for getting certain maps to drop. Let us now take a look at an example of this. The Tier 1 beach map has two adjacent Tier 2 maps, Desert and Arid Lake. If you have no unlocked Tier 2 maps, a chance that when a +1 map drops, it has a 1/2 chance to be either Desert or Arid Lake. Since both of these are locked and connected, they have the same doubled drop chance, making the chance of getting either equivalent. Now if Arid Lake is already completed and unlocked, the chance to drop Desert is now twice as high in comparison to Arid Lake, so the chance to find Desert is 2/3, while Arid Lake is 1/3. Every map that you unlock in a tier will lower the chances of any specific map of that tier dropping. For example, if we unlock every Tier 2 map except for Desert, the chance to find a Desert from Beach is now 2/7, while every other Tier 2 map has a 1/7 chance. Ultimately, these two simple Atlas rules can be used to force many variations of Atlas progression, sustain, and farming, of which we will cover later in the guide series. For now, we just need to remember these rules to get us through the Atlas. A note on unique maps. These two basic rules also apply to unique map bases connected on the Atlas. However, after you unlock the regular base of the unique map, you are then able to drop the unique map from any map as long as you get that tier of map to drop from the current tier being ran. Unique maps are also not considered in the normal map drop pool and are rather in the non-exclusive item pool, meaning that player increased item rarity and quantity do affect these drops. Unique maps can also be chanced from the map base whether or not you have it completed, and it is not recipe bound. While we are speaking to dropping +1 connected maps, there is actually a vendor recipe for that. A 3-to-1 vendor recipe allows you to sell 3 of the same map base to a vendor for a +1 tier adjacent map. You can also trade 3 of the same unique map bases as well. For example, we can trade 3 strands into an ancient city, or 3 of that map name into an ancient city. There are also other methods to obtaining maps that bypass the Atlas locked and unlocked rules, such as the map treasure chest from the Eternal Labyrinth. This chest can drop maps that are locked on your Atlas. This can be handy for jumpstarting or filling in missing maps on the Atlas. Another method is via corrupted maps from cartographers' strongboxes. We have not discussed crafting maps yet, however it is possible to get a +2 or higher tier map that are unconnected and locked due to how Vol corruptions work on maps. If you ever wish to uncomplete a map, or relock it, you can simply create and use a cartographer's seal orb for the respective tier. There is a cartographer's seal that is used for each major base color of map, white, yellow, and red. Each is created via a vendor recipe using their respective colored cartographer's sextant. Now that we have a good understanding on how maps are allowed to drop, let's move on to what tiers of maps can drop from within maps and their monsters, as well as what monsters are also allowed to drop maps. There are a slew of rules to which monsters and chests can drop what tiers of maps, as well as if they are even allowed to drop maps. To start, let's look at what tier levels each monster type can drop. Environmental spawns, such as breakable boxes, chests, or vases, and normal monsters can drop up to maps of the same tier. Magic and rare monsters can drop maps up to +1 tier. Unique bosses can drop maps up to +2 tier. These drop caps are what we refer to as the tier drop restriction, in that you are only able to naturally drop a maximum of +2 tier from the current base that you are running, provided that you have one unlocked, since you cannot drop locked maps that are not connected to the current base. So having magic and rare monsters in your maps is very beneficial for improving your high tier map returns. It is also important to remember that just because they can drop up to 1 or +2 maps from the current base does not mean that they are guaranteed to. All monster types can and still will drop maps at or below the base tier of map that you are running, meaning that you can still get tier 1 or 2 maps in your tier 16 maps. On top of base monster types, normal, magic, rare, and unique, there are also league-specific and special monster types. In general, these are monsters which cannot drop maps. Here's a list for all of the monsters that cannot drop maps as of patch 3.4. It is important to note that Piranha's chest can drop maps, as well as monsters possessed by tormented spirits, as long as that base monster that is infested can drop maps. As can be seen for these league monster types, maps are generally reserved to the rare league monsters only. While most of the other league monsters may not drop maps, they are still great for regular currency and item drops, as well as experience. Aside from monsters, there is also the Cartographer's Strongbox chest that can spawn in maps. These won't by default pass the Atlas restrictions, but if you get a plus to chest level on these, they can drop higher tier maps than you are in. If you are to Vol orb this box with a Vol corruption of outcome +1 to tier, these can go all the way to +3 or +4, effectively bypassing the Atlas rule. Basic strong boxes can also drop up to +5 or 6 with corruption, but it's a rare thing to happen that it drops a map to begin with. As a final note, player increased item rarity and quantity do not affect non-unique map drops. Now, along with Atlas unlocking and completion of maps, there is also Atlas completion bonus percentage, which increases the tiers of map drops and can be seen in the middle of the Atlas. Maps on the Atlas have a bonus objective that can be completed, which contributes to your overall Atlas bonus. The Atlas bonus gives a percentage chance that when a map drops, it will roll +1 tier higher. If you get this percentage all the way to 100%, all maps that drop will roll +1 tier higher from their original drop chosen base tier, as long as they fit the drop tier restriction. Going above 100% repeats the cycle, giving a percentage chance over 100 to roll +2 tiers higher from their original drop chosen base, again as long as they fit the tier drop restriction. Each map's bonus objective can be seen by hovering over the map and reading its tooltip. Once you have completed that objective, the map base will have a gold ring form around it. Some important notes about this. Atlas bonus cannot upgrade a map tier beyond the tier drop restrictions of the monsters. So for example, a normal monster in a tier 5 Haunted Mansion map, even with 150% Atlas bonus, will never be able to drop a tier 6 or 7 map even if they are unlocked. If a base tier 4 or 5 map was chosen to drop and the Atlas bonuses were applied, then it would be rolled back to an acceptable tier drop restriction, in this case a maximum of 5. Atlas bonus cannot bypass the locked Atlas rule. So even if the +1 or +2 tier drop is able to occur, it will only choose the connected locked maps or a +1 or 2 tier unlocked map. So for example, if we're running a tier 5 Haunted Mansion, you kill the boss in the chosen map base that it drops upgrades +2 tier to a tier 7, that map will only drop as a +2 tier if you have an unlocked tier 7 on your Atlas, such as Tribunal seen in the video. Otherwise, if there are no tier 7s, it will downgrade one level to an appropriate +1 tier. In our case, that would be a connected tier 6, Academy or Wharf map, as we have no other tier 6 unlocked. Now once you have 100% Atlas completion bonus, the lowest tier of map drop will be a tier 2. The only scenarios where this will not happen is a cartographers or monsters within the story, normal and breakable items within tier 1 maps, and by not having any adjacent -1 tier map and having every single map in the tiers below it locked in your Atlas, thus forcing a tier 1 to drop. This is a very specific scenario that would only happen in specific Shaped and Eldered Atlas setups. With all the information about this Atlas and map drops, let us get on to our first maps and talk about a basic progression strategy. So now we want to start in our first maps. We won't go into all the detail on how to specifically tailor and craft each map here, but give a general guideline to get through the first 5 tiers of maps. In general, it is most important to get map Atlas bonus percentage up to help bolster your chances at +1 or +2 tier maps where applicable. Here we'll just be covering the white map bases, tiers 1 through 5. All of these maps require just completion at magic rarity to get their Atlas bonus, which is cheap and easy. So to ensure to craft all white tier maps at magic rarity with 2 affixes, 1 prefix, and 1 suffix, making use of transmutation, alteration, and augmentation orbs to sort out viable affixes. After their bonus completion, they should still always be run at magic rarity at a minimum. If you have the currency to do so, you can always start out by running these at rare rarity via an alchemy orb. In this method, you never lose currency with an Alch and Go strategy, as long as your build is capable of running most all map modifiers, meaning that you will not have to re-roll your maps. For lower tier, non-red tier map bases, we will not concern ourselves with cartographers' chisels or other map enhancing methods quite yet. Since we are just starting with the basics, let's look at a simple but slower Atlas progression strategy that incorporates the Atlas mechanics that we have just discussed. The easiest progression strategy to visualize and to do is to complete all of the maps of the current tier while getting the next tier of maps from drops before running those. This means to start, you will want to complete all of your tier 1 maps, as well as get all of the locked and connected tier 2 maps to drop before moving on to starting your tier 2 maps. This is because you want to maintain the double drop chance from the connected lock maps to force those individual bases of that next tier to drop. If you were to complete a random tier 2 at this point, before getting all of them, you will have that unlocked map competing in the drop pool against all of the connected lock maps, hampering your progression. The downside of this method is that you're missing out on the +2 drops from map bosses, as you do not have any +2 maps unlocked, and makes farming the hard to obtain maps a bit more difficult. Hard to obtain maps are the maps that do not have a 3-to-1 vendor recipe. They do not have this recipe since they share a -1 tier adjacent map with many other maps of their tier, and only one of those maps from shared connection has the vendor recipe assigned. However, Zana, who we will discuss more next, both rewards and sells maps, allowing you to ease this issue with hard to obtain maps. For now, we will just leave the progression strategy at this, and take a further look at more complicated strategies in the later guides. Remember, if you are ever struggling to get a map, even after these methods, you can always trade with others if you are not in solo self-found. With the Atlas basics wrapped up here, we can move on to more advanced Atlas topics along with all the rest of the content that resides within it. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, Exile.